we are going to do a one-to-one scale drawing where you're going to measure things using a straight tool, measuring distances, and they will actually match on here. So they're going to be a certain size. All the time looking obsessively and repeatedly at your objects. As I'm doing this drawing, I need to really commit to where my head is, because if I move forward, I'm seeing more space in here, and if I move backward, it collapses in. So all kinds of proportions change, even if I'm just moving my head back and forth like this. You know, one trick is to match something up out there with something in reality. So if I'm right here, the lid of that cup is actually lining up with the wheel of a office chair in the distance. So if I close my left eye, use my right eye, I can line those up and I know that I'm in the right spot. So I'm going to keep my arm 100% straight. My pencil is going to be horizontal and not pointing forward and not pointing back, but trying to keep things in the perpendicular. And I've put my end of my pencil at the end of that lid and my fingers at the other. So that way I can measure what that item is. I can put a mark on here. And I'm not going to do this as cleanly as I might because I want this to show up in the camera, and I really hope it does show up. But that is my one-to-one mark of how wide that lid is. So this is the lid. I've got a mark that runs from here to here, and it's that big. When I stretch my arm like this and take a measure, it's exactly that. Cool. Okay, well, holding this straight up and down, let's try another measure. Let's take the height of this. So this is the height of the entire thing from the back lip to the part that's resting on the table. So I'm going to take that, and there it is. So if I could use this idea of a bounding box, and I mean there's several ellipses in here that I'll have to get to, but that lid fits in there. That lid fits in there just like that. Okay, well, so I'm measuring 1-to-1, so it's very easy to grab. I could measure some other things. I could say, if I put the top of the pencil at the bottom of that lid, then where is the foreground lip? It is exactly that. So that mark, so the close part of the lid will be there. Okay, and from the bottom of that up to the inside rim where the flat part ends is there. And to double check my measures, I can measure the top lid there, and that looks about right. So one ellipse is going to come around like this, and the other ellipse is going to come around like this, and I'm going to get some form in there. But I'm not going to do too much yet with that. But that's how that will sit in there, something like that. And it'll be handy to have an eraser on hand, as these measures could be, you know, it's going to take some work to get it all going. Okay, let's say how much space is there between that and the, so basically I'm running like a line up like this, and I'm measuring what is the next item I hit, which is the bottom of the staple gun, and it's really just this tiny little bit, like that. So it's smaller than the depth of the lid. It's kind of just this size of this. It's even smaller than what I got there. And that's on an angle, so I can try and figure, like, okay, if this is horizontal, I'm going to put a horizontal line here, and what angle is that, you know? So it's very shallow angle. of that coming down. So there we go. I can put a vertical line in here. To see where that rises up, and it cuts off the edge of the lid. So if my lid is in here, like this, where this staple gun hits, cuts off the edge of that lid. So if that's the bounding box for this, this is going to rise up right here. So there we go. This is coming this way. This is coming that way. So let me measure the height of that. So I'm holding my arm straight, and I'm still using my right eye, and it's coming all the way up. So I want the end to be where that curves in. Like that. So that is from there to there. So there we go. That is where that starts to curve inward. So there's a corner here, and it's got a little inward movement. So from the bottom to the next curve is that far. So I got my fingers here, and I'm going to just mark here, and that, wow, that seems quite small. I'm slightly surprised by that. I'm wondering if I did that wrong. So let's double check. How many times does that height go into the height I've already got? 1, 2, 3, 4. So that height, 1, 2, 3, 4. Huh, really is that small. So this is why measuring is good. It's I'm questioning the world, I'm questioning my eyesight, and trying to move forward with that. So that's interesting. Let's give myself a measure for this wider part here. It's that. That's the distance from here to here. So here's where that changes. Double check. From there to there. From there to there. I'd say that's come in a little bit. So this comes across and has a little notch in at that point, and then it continues on its diagonal, very slight diagonal march down. Yeah, that's interesting. How many times does that go into here? 1. That's more than half. That is more than half. Yeah, okay. I'm still on track. How long is this longer part? Arm is straight, one eye, and it's almost the whole pencil just running along that size. It's basically from this silver area on the pencil. I can put a little tick down here. So that is where that staple gun starts to rise up again. Okay. Let's measure. So this is where that indent is. Seems long. Can that be right? Let's put a horizontal line in here, see what we get. Well, metal cap to the end. Metal cap to the end. Maybe just a little long. Talking millimeters. Let's just bring it in a little bit. And this kind of measuring and remeasuring is part of what Makes this philosophically interesting exercise. You question yourself and you look again. So let's take a distance from that seam we have to the close side of that hole that your fingers go through when you're using the staple gun. And it's like this. So now I'm going to measure from the bottom of this up to where the jar hits. Bottom of that up to where the jar hits. So the jar hits there, which is not the lowest point of the jar. So the jar has a little bit of an angle, and of course the jar comes behind. So if I were to drop that down, where does that hit the side of the jar? The side of the jar is to the left of these buttons and things here. It's in the middle of this facet at the top, left of those. So the jar is going to be here. So I'm going to just place that in. How wide is the jar? So now that I have the right side of the jar relative to the stapler, I can measure how wide the jar is. And it's going to go to there. So this idea of the bounding box comes back. I can just place that in there. So I have the right side and the left side. So how tall? Well, how tall from the stapler before it starts to curve? So we have this from the stapler until this starts to curve in. So there's going to be an ellipse at the top. So I'm going to want to divide this in half, have a center line, which is going to be more important to me at the top than at the bottom, because there's actually a little bit of a rectangularness to this bottle. But there's my top of the ellipse, and that ellipse is this tall. That ellipse is this tall. Wow, looks way too big. Is that right? Let's check. Pencil at the top, finger where that same top lip comes around, and it's that big. Wow, that is bigger than I thought. What is the width of that? From there to there, from there to there, from there to there. That is the shape of the ellipse. So the mouth of the jar is that wide, whereas the width of the jar is that wide. So this comes up, and the ellipses come forward and down. So yeah, do these come? Yeah, it does feel like they could hit that. They come in more. So let's imagine an ellipse in here. So starting horizontal, I want my ellipse to fit in this box that I've determined. This is starting vertical. This is starting horizontal, and somehow I bring that curve together. And then I'm going to do the same thing here, starting vertical, coming around, always turning, always turning. And there it is. So let's do, looking at the lid there, let's do the upper ellipse first. So the upper ellipse ends here and ends up here. So these I'm going to ignore for a moment. I'm going to ignore that for the moment and just make an ellipse sit beautifully in there. So I want to know my center. I want to know my center this way. And I'm going to make it fit in there. So I'm going to come up, I'm going to come across,